Coming up on Arirang News, the top diplomats of South Korea and Japan sit down in Beijing to talk trade in what's likely to have been a tense meeting. They also hold talks with the Chinese foreign minister on three-way cooperation. The South Korean government announces nearly $4 billion of investment in new industries for the fourth industrial revolution. The hope is to promote innovation, especially in the key sector of semiconductors. And Korean regulators announced tough new inspections on food from parts of Japan contaminated with radiation, amid fears that Japan won't be able to handle all the wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear plant much longer. It's 4 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on our afternoon newscast. I'm Devin Whiting. The top diplomats of South Korea and Japan met in Beijing about an hour ago. We don't know much about the meeting yet, but it's expected to have been tough. For more, we connect to our Ji-won, who's live at Seoul's Foreign Ministry. Ji-won, tell us what you know.
Devin, so from 3 to 3:30 Korea time, Seoul's Foreign Affairs Minister Kang Kyung-hwa is known to have met with Minister Taro Kono on the sidelines of the 9th Seoul, Beijing, Tokyo Foreign Affairs Ministers talk that took place earlier in the day. Now, we do not yet have the details of what the two diplomats said to each other, and we're not expected to hear any groundbreaking news. Before leaving for Beijing on Tuesday, Kang had said that she will once again actively relay Seoul's stance on Japan's unfair trade restrictions on it. At the meeting, she's expected to have continued urging Japan to come to the negotiating table while arguing that the export controls should be lifted. Now, Japan is too expected to have continued reiterating its stance that the restrictions were imposed due to security reasons, while urging Seoul to intervene in its Supreme Court's orders for Japanese firms to compensate the Koreans forced to work for them during Japan's colonial rule. Now, a negative outlook for this meeting is supported by the results of their Director General's levels meeting just the day before, where Japan made it clear that it will not resume talks related to its export restrictions. Meanwhile, the two ministers held a trilateral sit-down with their Chinese counterpart Wang Yi earlier today. And at the press conference that followed, the ministers highlighted the importance of their trilateral cooperation. Now here, Minister Wang Yi added that a correct view of history and a focus on the future is the basis of their cooperation, and that maintaining good relationship is the driving force. He urged Seoul and Tokyo to resolve their differences in a constructive manner and said the three countries should support free trade and multilateralism. At his meeting with Minister Kang the day before, Wang Yi is known to have said that the two sides should resolve the issue through dialogue. That's all from me for now.
All right, Ji-won reporting there from the Foreign Ministry. We'll look forward to hearing more about that meeting if anything comes out. Now, President Moon Jae-in's Chief of Staff for Policy, Kim Sang-jo, has reiterated that nothing's been decided about whether to keep sharing military intelligence with Japan under a bilateral pact known as GSOMIA. Today, in his first panel discussion with the press since he took the post, Kim said various factors will be taken into account, including the security of Northeast Asia, which centers on cooperation between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. However, the government, he said, must also consider whether it's appropriate to extend such a pact with a country that says it cannot trust Korea. Kim also expects that bilateral relations will depend on cabinet reshuffles in Japan, likely to take place next month, placing particular importance on the coronation ceremony of the Japanese emperor in October. Over the next 2 days, Washington's point man on North Korea, Stephen Biegun, will be meeting with senior South Korean officials here in Seoul about the stalled denuclearization talks with the North. Earlier today, Biegun met his South Korean counterpart, Lee Do-hoon. They likely coordinated their strategies on the working-level talks with the North and discussed the regime's recent missile launches. Biegun will also meet Seoul's Unification Minister Kim Yeon-chul later today. On his last day in Seoul on Thursday, the U.S. envoy will meet the Deputy Chief of Seoul's National Security Council, Kim Hyun-jong, before heading to China. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Pompeo is calling on North Korea to come back to the table for talks on its denuclearization, saying that would be the best thing for the North Korean people. Kim Hyo-sun reports.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has urged North Korea to come to the negotiating table, expressing concerns over the regime's latest missile test launches. Speaking to CBS on Tuesday, Pompeo said the two countries have not returned to the table as quickly as he would have hoped. Such remarks follow the North's launching of two projectiles last Friday, the latest in a series of tests of short-range missiles or other projectiles by the regime since late July, in protest against joint military drills between Seoul and Washington. The message comes as U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun, is in South Korea to discuss the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Pompeo also said he hopes to see Chairman Kim Jong-un come to the negotiating table for a better outcome, which will ultimately help the North Korean people as well as the international community. Referring to Kim's denuclearization pledge made in Singapore last year, Pompeo highlighted that President Trump is committed to keeping the American people safe by ensuring the North Korean leader delivers on his promise. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the International Atomic Energy Agency says North Korea continued its nuclear activities last year and has made some progress. In a report it'll submit to the UN General Assembly next month, the IAEA said it found signs that the North's 5-megawatt nuclear reactor in Yongbyon was operational until mid-August last year. It was running intermittently until November and not at all in December. The agency also said the North used steam superheaters in its reprocessing plant from late April to early May, and that centrifuge enrichment facilities were powered up as well. The IAEA said those activities are a clear violation of UN Security Council resolutions and are very regrettable. South Korea and the U.S. will soon start negotiating how to share the cost of stationing American troops here. President Trump wants Seoul to pay a lot more. Ahead of that, the two sides held a preliminary meeting yesterday. Kan Young-woo has this report.
The heads of the previous round of South Korea-U.S. defense cost-sharing negotiations, Chang Won-sam and Timothy Betts, held a closed-door meeting in Seoul on Tuesday. The sit-down was a pre-consultation ahead of the next round of talks for splitting the cost of keeping the roughly 28,000 American troops stationed on the Korean peninsula.
We are aware that a pre-consultation took place between the chief negotiators on defense cost sharing. We will let you know the specific result if there's something we need to tell you.
Although not many details have been released about Tuesday's closed-door meeting, the focus is on how much more the U.S. is asking South Korea to stump up. Earlier this month, President Trump said talks to increase South Korea's contribution had begun, and Seoul had already agreed to pay the amount requested.
South Korea and I have made a deal where they're paying a lot more money and they're going to pay a lot more money, and the relationship is a very good one.
But Seoul's foreign ministry swiftly responded, saying official negotiations for the 11th round of the special measures agreement have not started yet. According to a ministry official, both sides agreed that negotiations need to begin as soon as possible, with the current deal set to expire at the end of this year. In March, Seoul signed its 10th SMA with Washington, agreeing to pay some $850 million in 2019 for its share of stationing U.S. troops on the peninsula, a roughly 8% increase from the previous year. Kan Young-woo, Arirang News.
South Korea is getting ready to take a leading position in the fourth industrial revolution. And to do so, the government has announced billions of dollars in investment to support related sectors like 5G, AI, and new semiconductors. Our Hong Yu has the details.
South Korea's Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi said the government will invest more than $3.8 billion next year in spreading innovation to all sectors of industry. During a meeting held at the Export-Import Bank of Korea on Wednesday morning, Hong said more than $1.4 billion will be used to develop industries related to data, 5G networks, and AI, also known as the DNA sector. And more than $2.4 billion will be used for system semiconductors, biohealth, and future cars. Laying out the steps of innovation, he said first, funds for core infrastructure needed for the DNA sector will be increased. Then the government aims to spread innovation to the development of technology for hydrogen and electric car batteries, create a testbed for system semiconductors, and make a big data platform for medical data-centered hospitals through investment in 3 new industries. Meanwhile, the information and communications technology sector saw a trade surplus of more than $4.7 billion in July. But it also showed a more than 20% fall in exports due to a slump in semiconductors, displays, and mobile phones, the three main ICT export items. Finance Minister Hong wrapped up the meeting by saying he will speed up innovation by strengthening labor and regulations. He plans to train more than 200,000 people as AI experts and expand the proactive regulatory roadmap based on future predictions to all ministries by 2023. Hong-yu, Arirang News.
Now, since long before Japan's export restrictions kicked in, small and mid-sized companies here in Korea have been trying to localize and perfect their own parts and materials needed for the semiconductor industry. Now, Kim Na-mi has this story.
These connectors are just one of 1,000 parts used to make a smartphone, but they're essential if a smartphone is to function properly. Smaller than the size of an ant, the board-to-board connectors connect electric circuits. From its raw material, hyperphosphor bronze, to the manufacturing process, the connectors are 100% made in South Korea.
New future growth is derived from persistent and continuous R&D. We have poured in over $10 million over the past 4 years, which has allowed us to export our very own products to China and even Japan.
Another local SME has mastered the production of a reclaimed wafer and is more well-known in the global semiconductor industry. Reclaimed wafers are recycled wafers. With its wafers mostly exported to the U.S., the firm is one of the largest reclaimed wafer suppliers in the Asia-Pacific region. Plus, its wafers are 30% cheaper than the Japanese ones. These local firms, however, struggle to shine because of large conglomerates' preference for foreign products after years of heavy reliance and easy access.
Local conglomerates have been loyal customers of Japanese parts and material firms for their advanced technologies and close geographical distance. South Korea's large and frequent orders of Japanese products over the years have pushed Japanese firms to further develop skills and technologies.
Instead, local SMEs say it's time to trust Korea's localized products. The more they're used, the more they will improve through trial and error. To do that, the Ministry of SMEs and Startups promised earlier last week to help match conglomerates with SMEs so they can build symbiotic relations with their needs and wants.
A cooperating system needs to be constructed where conglomerates request for parts and materials they need and local SMEs develop and produce them.
Insisting on adopting local products may be unrealistic in the world of global value chains. But active use of local products will help local firms survive and thrive against global competition and bring Korea one step closer to technological independence. Kim Na-mi, Arirang News.
We're going to see strengthened inspections here in Korea on food imported from Japan's Fukushima region over concerns about radiation. The Ministry of Food and Drug Safety says that from Friday, it'll double the number of inspections on imported food from the area that have had higher levels of radiation in the past. The ministry also plans to analyze inspections from the past 5 years and double-check items that have been sent back due to contamination. A total of 17 items will be checked, including 10 processed foods and 3 agricultural products. The Korean Sport and Olympic Committees also raised concerns over the Fukushima radiation and food from that region at an Olympic meeting in Tokyo. However, Tokyo's Olympic Organizing Committee dismissed the claims on Tuesday, saying they're doing all they can to ensure the food supply is completely safe for next year's Summer Olympics. Other issues, including Japan's sweltering summer heat and poor water quality, were raised by other delegations. This week's seminar is checking on preparations for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. It's time now for an in-depth look at the global markets this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Hwang Se-eun, Research Fellow at the Korea Capital Market Institute. Dr. Hwang, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me today, too.
So, U.S. stocks were down on Tuesday. Concerns over treasuries again. Korean stocks, though, a little higher today. What's the story here?
In the U.S. stock market, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell for the first time in 4 sessions Tuesday, parrying some of the strong gains from the previous session as recession fears lingered. The S&P 500 index also closed lower as U.S. President Donald Trump showed no urgency to resolve trade friction with China and renewed his call for a big Federal Reserve rate cut. The major indexes fell to their session lows in the final minutes of trading as Treasury yields declined as well. Stocks in Asia showed mixed movements after a weak U.S. session and a further move lower in Treasury yields overnight. Investors assessed the latest news on the trade talks and awaited more clues on monetary policy. Japanese equities bore the brunt of losses while stocks in South Korea rose. Japan's Nikkei dropped 0.28%, but South Korea's Kospi gained 0.22% today.
Right. Well, in the U.S., President Trump dismissing talk of a recession, his administration looking into ways to lower taxes. Does President Trump have good reason to downplay the recession, and how have the markets responded?
President Donald Trump said on Tuesday his administration was considering temporary tax cuts on wages as well as profits from asset sales as a strategy to boost the economy, even as he maintains the country's economic outlook remains strong. An economic slowdown would be bad news for Trump, who is building his 2020 bid for a second term around the economy's performance, but whose year-long trade war with China is weighing on growth. People payroll taxes in order to finance Social Security and Medicare. Former President Obama had enacted a temporary payroll tax cut during his presidency in an effort to boost the economy. Cutting those taxes could temporarily help the middle class, but could also increase the fiscal deficit and possibly hurt the social safety net programs they fund. Trump will need to boost up the economy to get more votes for his second term. However, a temporary tax cut is not likely to end up with sizable economic impacts.
Well, here in Korea, Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi announcing new investments into 6 innovative areas of the economy, including system semiconductors, around 4.7 trillion won, I believe. What's he trying to do here, and what can we expect to come out of this?
The main purposes of the government investment include to boost up the economic growth and reduce technological dependence on Japan. Policymakers are quite concerned on declining growth rate, which is partly driven by fast-aging population and fewer rising star companies. In addition, after Japan slapped tougher regulations on exports to South Korea of 3 key materials used in memory chips and display panels in early July, there are much stronger demands for localization in manufacturing. The planned investment in core infrastructure and new industries is meant to help innovative growth spill over into other industrial sectors. South Korea has been eager to boost the hydrogen economy and other innovative sectors as new growth engines amid slowing exports and investment. If the government investment is coupled with the industrial deregulation, then they will be able to make sizable impacts on economic growth in the long run.
Well, that is the hope. All right, Dr. Huang, that's where we'll have to leave it today. Thank you again for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Now, South Korea is banning sales here of several models made by Audi, Volkswagen, and Porsche, saying they violated regulations on emissions. The Environment Ministry has announced heavy fines for all 3 and is urging prosecutors to open criminal cases against them. Lee Sung-jae reports.
The Ministry of Environment announced Tuesday that it will ban domestic sales of 8 models of Audi, Volkswagen, and Porsche diesel cars for violating emissions regulations. The move comes as a probe by the ministry found that the German automakers manipulated pollution control devices in the vehicles. Reports indicate 1,261 cars from the 8 models were sold in South Korea from May 2015 to January last year. The ban comes as tests showed diesel exhaust fluid, which limits emissions, was performing at lower levels than reported in the automaker's certification tests. The rigging caused the cars to emit 10 times more nitrogen oxide gas into the atmosphere compared to normal levels.
Cutting the capacity of the diesel exhaust fluid tank helps the manufacturer in terms of space utilization and design by reducing the size of the trunk. However, for the consumer, this reduces the amount of diesel exhaust fluid in the vehicles.
The ministry plans to cancel the import certifications of the affected models, order correction measures, and impose heavy penalties. Audi Volkswagen Korea is said to be fined $6.5 million, while Porsche Korea faces a fine of $3.3 million. The ministry adds it will also file complaints with the prosecution to investigate the automakers. The inquiry was launched in mid-2018 when Germany detected tempered emissions control systems in cars made by Audi. 이승재, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea has long been regarded as a country that creates entertaining content loved by viewers around the world. And on Wednesday, Broadcast Worldwide, or BCWW, South Korea's biggest broadcast content market for international broadcasting networks and buyers, opened for a 3-day run at the KoreaUS Convention Center in southern Seoul. Held under the theme Content Connecting the World, this year's event aims to introduce a wider variety of TV programs and focus on the future of broadcasting with the influx of ultra-fast 5G technology. Korea is seeing some major growth in the market for products that are vegan. For ethical and health reasons, interest is rising, and analysts say the country is looking at a market worth tens of billions of dollars in the next several years. Kim Hae-sung tells us more.
A growing number of Korean consumers these days look for vegan signs when shopping for cosmetics.
I look at smartphone cosmetics apps to make sure I buy products that use eco-friendly ingredients, not chemical ingredients.
From shampoos to lotions, vegan cosmetics products are stamped with a vegan certification mark, proving they did not use animal ingredients or byproducts in the manufacturing process, haven't been tested on animals, and are GMO-free. Since early this year, foreign and Korean local cosmetics brands have supplied drugstores with vegan products, and the vegan cosmetics market is expected to top $20 billion by 2025. According to the Korea Vegetarian Union, around 1.5 million Koreans are estimated to be vegans or vegetarians. That's 3% of the total population and is more than 10 times the figure back in 2008.
Millennials have a tendency to show their values and beliefs via their consumption patterns. With this change in awareness that emphasizes ethical consumption and animal protection, and social media that spreads this message via pictures and videos, more companies are coming up with vegan products, and veganism is growing rapidly.
On factors like animal welfare, health, and environmental protection, interest in veganism has increased, and the vegan food businesses, including burger restaurants and bakeries, are booming. At grocery stores, consumers can also easily find meat-free, plant-based products. Already in North America and Europe, fast food chains offer vegan burgers, vegan donuts, vegan tacos, and even vegan ice creams. And a similar phenomenon is happening in Asia, meaning more innovative vegan products are set to be released in the next couple of years. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.